welcome once again to Sid Caudle. And this is a big week for everybody. Well, it certainly is for the Prime Minister. Let's hope I'm sure he will, get out of it, live to see another day. He's been doing it since he's been in power, let's be honest, Sid. It's just another day for him. But this one, will it catch him out?
Well, yeah, I've come to the conclusion that either Keir Starmer resigns, or if he doesn't resign, then he's going to get more and more unpopular and he's going to drag the Labour Party down with him. This is very serious because, you see, either he's lied to Parliament because he told Parliament that they went through a very rigorous process and nothing came up in the process that would lead him to believe that Peter Mandelson could not be appointed as ambassador to the United States. And bearing in mind this was a political appointment. Yes, if it had been a matter of a career diplomat that was being appointed and the Foreign Office had overridden the vetting procedure and said, no, we want to appoint him, then you'd have to say that is the responsibility of the Foreign Office, what they've done. But since it was a political appointment and the Foreign Office were very clear, it was Keir Starmer that wanted the appointment and he was and they overrode the vetting procedure in order to get the political appointment in place. It is the politician who appointed him, i.e. Keir Starmer, who has to take responsibility. Now, he said that the vetting was perfectly okay. To Parliament, either he was lying to Parliament or he said something which he didn't actually find out the facts before he said it, which is incompetence. So he was either lying or he's incompetent. And on both grounds, he has to resign. I'm afraid he has to take responsibility. He said, "Oh, I was never told. I was never told that that Peter Mandelson failed the vetting." Well, it was his job to ask. You can't tell Parliament and something and it be false and say, "Oh, I wasn't told what I said was false." I'm sorry, no. You have to find out the facts before you make the statement. Simple.
Yeah, the worst scenario, of course, is perhaps incompetence. He should never have been appointed Prime Minister in the first place, and he's been doing cover-ups ever since. Interesting to note, Sid, that the Blob, first named by Dominic Cummings, he should know, have closed ranks. And if you're upsetting the elites, the civil service, the Blob, you've got a problem. They're fed up with him.
Well, in my opinion, Keir Starmer thought that none of this information would come to light. He thought he could just appoint Peter Mandelson. It didn't really matter what the vetting said. No one would ever find out if there was any problems in the vetting. That was all a private procedure that was being undertaken. And you see, what's happened is that the Kemi Badenoch has been very clever in forcing all this information to come to light. And because there was concerns about the procedure, I mean, it all started when Kemi Badenoch asked Keir Starmer in Parliament, "Did you know about the relationship between Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein?" And Keir Starmer didn't want to answer. Three times he didn't answer the question. On the fourth time, she came back to him and said, "I'm asking again. Did you know about the relationship between Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein before you appointed him?" And he came back and said, "Yes, I did know." And there were gasps from Parliament when he said it. It's the first time he'd actually answered a question in probably in 50 questions, because normally he doesn't answer the question. That time he did, but he was forced to because she kept asking the same question over and over again. And that let the cat out of the bag. So now they knew that Keir Starmer knew about the relationship between Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein before he appointed him. So then they wanted to know all the information about the procedure. And that was what was then forced to come out to light. Now, Keir Starmer thought none of that would ever come to light. That's what's going on.
The other thing that's going on, Sid, is procrastination. Now, by that I mean, of course, putting things off. and it's the election on the 7th of next month, May. And who have we got to replace him? Whether it come before the election or after the elections, who would you trust as Prime Minister? The front runners, everybody knows. Andy Burnham's a problem, of course. He's not got a seat in Parliament, and maybe they'll have problems finding the so-called safe seat to get in there if they want it. But who's going to have Angela Rayner? Who's going to have Ed Miliband? And any of the other ones? This frying pan and fire spring to mind.
Yes, I totally agree. In my view, none of them are suitable. One of the major problems is that Angela Rayner certainly hasn't grasped the fact that you have to look after business. And if you're not looking after business, which create the wealth, then you don't have enough money for everything else you want. Angela Rayner is still of this idea that state money is infinite and you can spend as much as you like. And they say things like, oh, it's ridiculous. We're having this argument between welfare and defence. We can spend as much as we like on welfare and we can spend as much as we like on defence. Stop having this argument. Because they don't realise that actually money has to come from somewhere. And they've already substantially increased taxes, which is having a really bad effect on the economy. They can't increase taxes anymore. I mean, before the election, they were going on about the windfall tax on the oil companies. We've got to increase the windfall tax on the oil companies. I was saying then it's already 75%. What are you going to increase it to? Well, they've actually increased it to 78% from 75%. So, in percentage terms, it's only a small increase. It's almost like tokenism. But actually, the whole windfall tax on oil companies was nonsense. And it's destroyed the exploration of the North Sea. And we're now in a situation where we've got major problems with energy, because of this ridiculous windfall tax on oil companies that's destroying, British production of oil and gas. And, it's just completely negative result. But they have this idea, oh, these incredibly wealthy oil companies, we can take as much as we like off them and it'll have no effect. Sorry, it does have an effect.
Yeah, more of that later. We've just got some interesting statistics that need airing. But before we do that, let's go on to what seems to be a love affair between Sir Keir and China. Now, something is going on here. Nobody knows what, but it's clear that something is. This nonsense about the Chinese embassy. And the Telegraph actually got hold of the non-redacted plans for that. My goodness me, you could not allow that in any banana republic on this earth. When you look at the basement area, which is the secret area of any embassy, and if you look at rooms positioned next to, within 1 metre of the main fibre optic cable that literally controls the whole country, all you've got to do is to bore a little 1 metre hole and put a clamp on that, and you're privy to anything that is floating through those cables and wires. It's utter madness. Nobody would allow that, and yet it's still going to go ahead. The super embassy.
Yes. And there's something insidious going on here, because if you don't mind us going back to Peter Mandelson for a moment, you see, one thing that they found out was that Peter Mandelson was not only feeding cabinet information to Jeffrey Epstein for money, he was also feeding cabinet information to China for money. This was one of the things they found out. Now, I would guess, I don't know, but I would guess one of the main reasons he failed the vetting procedure was because in the vetting procedure they actually found this out. And obviously, if they found out that Peter Mandelson, when he was in the cabinet, was feeding information from government to China for money, obviously he was unsuitable to be US ambassador. So, but if Keir Starmer also knew, which he probably did, that Peter Mandelson was feeding information to China for money when he was in the cabinet and still appointed him and said that doesn't matter, that shows that Keir Starmer is also probably in hoc to China in some way. And this is extremely serious because you can't have people right in the centre of government feeding information to China and it doesn't matter. So we also had a situation where Ed Miliband, as energy secretary, was going to China and basically asking China what they wanted. And he said, why is our energy secretary going to China? You think, what's he got to do with China? Where we get our energy from. But apparently it was extremely important to get clearance from China as to what they were doing. This to me shows that there's something very, very wrong going on in the heart of government.
Yes, it does. Let's go to another secret society, that being President Trump and Iran, and who's running Iran at the moment. And he's confident he's won the war already, and certain other people are as well. But it drags on, and it comes down, Sid, to the Iranian army, who are hardline in the extreme. You've got to be killing 40,000 young people, haven't you? And it worries me and concerns me that Europe in general seems to be supporting that regime. Certainly, it comes out in the press releases, as opposed to Trump. Europe hates Trump, so much so they're prepared to believe the rubbish that comes out of Iran.
Yes, I mean, we should distinguish, of course, between the Iranian army and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is IRGC, which Europe have banned. Although Britain haven't banned, because we think it doesn't matter killing 40,000 demonstrators, apparently. But it was the IRGC was killing the demonstrators, not the routine Iranian army. And the reports from the routine Iranian army is that there's a lot of soldiers that have actually been deserting, en masse. So the IRGC are very much the power behind the regime, and it's them that have got to be overthrown, frankly. I think if Trump does invade Iran, which is still very possible because he's sending another 10,000 troops over to the area, and there's now many thousand troops that are stationed just off Iran, and you're not going to tell me they're all there for nothing. So they're either there to put pressure on Iran, which Trump hopes that he can put enough pressure on Iran that they'll just give in, hand over all their nuclear charged material, which is prepared for nuclear weapons. They haven't actually got a nuclear weapon, but they've got a lot of nuclear charged material ready for it. Trump wants all that handed over. He hopes that they will agree and they'll hand it over, and they'll also agree to some democratic elections or whatever, whatever else that he wants, that they'll cooperate with him in the same way, incredibly, and from my perspective, that the Venezuelan government are now just cooperating with him. And that's what he hopes. But he's in reserve. He's got all these soldiers. Now, I think if the United States do invade Iran, that I don't think the IRGC are going to be strong enough to defeat them. I think they will win, and I think the ordinary people in Iran will overwhelmingly welcome the US Army, and that is extremely important, because if the ordinary people in Iran rose up and were united in opposing a US invasion, then it would likely to be something that became very nasty and bogged down, a little bit like Vietnam, a little bit like Russia in Ukraine. But if the people of Iran overwhelmingly welcome the American army, then I think they'll be speedily successful. That's my opinion. But we've got to wait and see what will happen. It's not over yet. I think Trump is saying it's over in order to try and strengthen his hand in negotiations. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. There's a right time for everything, and it's very difficult when you're facing that sort of a regime.
Mm.
And you're fighting their God. They will do anything to serve him. And it's not like, as you mentioned, going into Venezuela. It is a very evil regime in the fullest sense of that word.
Mm. Yeah, no, absolutely. That is something that is behind it, which is incidentally that's also why the Muslims generally are so desperately keen to literally wipe out Israel from the river to the sea, because historically, when the Muslims occupied Jerusalem, the Crusaders arrived from on the instructions of the Pope and removed the Muslims from Jerusalem. But the Crusades continued for over 100 years, and the end result was that the Muslims took back Jerusalem. And they said that we have shown that Islam is a superior religion to Christianity because we've won the war. Now, from my perspective, that wasn't Christianity at all. The Crusades had nothing to do with Christianity. And that is not how, certainly how Jesus told us to behave. But that's what the Muslims said, and that was the Muslim perception. And now they've lost Jerusalem and they no longer occupy the whole area. Now they are desperate to win it back in order to prove that Islam is a superior religion. That's what's going on.
Yeah. Okay. What's going on in Spain here this weekend has been interesting because we've got an extreme left-wing government here. And they are supporting Iran. They always have been since day one. And they coming out more and more saying this, so much so, even though the general public here is anti-American, anti-Trump, there's a big hundreds of thousands of people in the center of Madrid this weekend saying, no, we support Israel. That's nice to see, but one doesn't trust the media here, just like we don't trust it in the United Kingdom or the US for that matter. A manipulation generally throughout Europe is to favour Iran because, apart from a certain number of governments in the European Union, most are centre left. Some are very left. Spain is one of them. We must move on, Sid, and let's get some basics understood here about the United Kingdom, the gross domestic product, and the fact that the service sector, and this for many decades, has been pretty close and is actually now hit the 80% mark of economic output. In other words, we're not making anything with our hands, hardly. It's all public service sector. And that's one side of it. That's where we get our money from. Banking, advice, lawyers, etc. Where does the money go to? Here we've got the latest statistics, and I want, please, your commentary on each of them. The first one, let's call it social protection stroke welfare. Yeah, that's in the news at the moment. It means pensioners, state pension. It means family child benefit. It means universal credit. It means disability support. 333 billion. This is the biggest pot of them all, is going on social services. Too much or not?
Yeah, well, yes, that is obviously an enormous figure, and absolutely it has to come down. How we bring it down is not immediately clear, but we certainly think there has to be a greater incentive for people to get back to work. It's very, very important that people are better off in work than on benefits. And this is one reason why the Conservatives introduced the two-child benefit cap. Because if you've got a very big family, you say 7 or 8 children, which can happen in some circumstances, then what you're entitled to in benefits is so great that the chances are you're never going to be better off going to work. So really, that's why the Conservatives said we've got to stop this, encouraging people to have these enormous families and paying them enormous benefits because they've got a very large family, and leave benefits to be a maximum for 2 children, which tends to then favour more the indigenous white population than the Islamic population, who are encouraged to have very large families. But that is the reality. So we've got, I mean, in our policy, we've actually put something now in place to say that we guarantee anyone that has been on benefits that goes into work at least 25% more in income than they receive on benefits. And I believe that that policy hopefully will if it's ever implemented, will bear fruit and will be successful.
Yeah, there are certain things here that are sort of staggering. I'll give you one of them. Somebody had the bright idea once of getting away from what I call carriages for disabled people. There used to be three-wheeler things that were not very safe. Oh, well, it's going to be cheaper if we give them a car. Latest statistics from last year, 1 in 3 of the new car sales in Britain are for disabled people. That is astonishing.
Mm.
And it's illustrative of the waste on other things as well. It's not our money. Spend them, give them a new BMW.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I did know somebody who was disabled, and he wasn't really getting around very much at all. But it's like I've been offered a car, and I can have a car, and I'm looking for somebody maybe who can drive me around because I can't drive myself. But I've been offered a car. If I can find someone to drive me around, then they can have a car which is free, provided they agree to drive me around when I want to be driven around. And you sort of think, oh, okay. That's what you've been offered, is it? Yeah, yeah. And it's like, it's yeah. You think, well, I'm amazed that they've got the resources to do that. But when you come to the conclusion that 1/3 of all new cars are now being handed out by the state, you think, come on, that's far too many.
And other things. It's dead easy to game the system in the United Kingdom. Ask any illegal immigrant.
You
It's
see,
all part of the same thing.
yeah.
Uh,
But by the way, the other obvious thing that arises from this is why is it all new cars that disabled people are getting? I mean, most people, can't afford brand new cars. So why does a disabled person have to have a brand new car? I mean, surely if you have a car that's 5 years old, it's still going to be a pretty decent car, isn't it? I mean, the idea that the state can only give disabled people brand new cars is itself complete nonsense.
yeah, not joined together and has not been for a long while. Let's go to number 2 on the list of spends. 202 billion for doctors, nurses, pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, contractors. You name it, it's all in there. In other words, the NHS. A lot of money going out there.
Yes, the total budget of the NHS is probably a little bit more than that, but yeah, I mean that's why we're saying we need to go back to GP fund holding because GP fund holding worked, and as I've said before, what's the big problem at the moment is that there's too many people going to accident and emergency that don't need. An ambulance driver said to me that more than 90% of the calls I do aren't necessary. And you think, okay, so an ambulance driver is telling me he's on the inside of all this, and 90% of the people that he's taking to hospital don't actually need to go to hospital. So if we can get the GP system sorted out, and everyone tells you, I can't get a GP appointment. I mean, I myself just this last week went to hospital to have some blood taken for PSA. See, that could easily be done by the GP, but I can't get a GP appointment to have it done by the GP, so I go to the hospital to have it done. And this carries on over and over again. Now, if we had GP fund holding, the GP would control the money and wouldn't let me go to the hospital to have that done. He would literally say, "Yep, you've got to come into the surgery, and we'll have the blood taken and send it off." It would be there's a lot less bureaucracy involved in that. So we've got to get the GP system sorted out. Get the GP system sorted out, we can take the pressure off hospitals, and we can reduce the budget. That's the reality of it.
Okay, number 3 on the list, 95 billion. Teachers' salaries, school infrastructure, funding of universities. It's a heck of a lot. Well, it's less than half just of the NHS, but it's a big part of it. Is it working?
Well, I think what's gone wrong, frankly, is this government imposing VAT on private school fees, because by imposing VAT on private school fees, they said that they were going to raise billions of pounds, but it hasn't worked because all they've done is push more people into the public sector and imposed a greater burden on the public sector. So quite the opposite. I think in order to reduce the education budget, we should actually be encouraging people to go privately. And there's a lot of people, Christians especially, Christian parents, that are losing confidence in the state sector for education because of the relationship and sex education that's being taught. And there's other completely immoral values that are being taught in schools. So there's a lot of parents that are saying, I don't want my children to go to a state school anymore. I want to educate them at home, or I want them to go to a Christian school, and I'm willing to pay for it. But the state is actually saying, we don't want anyone to be paid for privately. We don't want anyone educated at home. We've got to stop this process. That is what, frankly, is now going wrong with education.
Well, not only education, so the ideology is taking over the whole system in the UK at the moment. No more so, of course, than Ed Miliband with his stupid no drilling, no drilling, no drilling. Come to that again shortly. The next lump of money going out, and actually it's a bit more than education at the moment. It's 114 billion, but that it goes up and down. Let's keep it on number 4. Private investors and foreign governments who hold UK gilts. This, in other words, is the debt interest. Being wasted, my goodness me, what could we do with that money?
Yes, but we're not going to substantially reduce debt interest quickly, because the debt, which is enormous, over $1 trillion, or sorry, over £1 trillion, is not something that we can just get down quickly. What we have to concentrate on is getting down the deficit. And it's the deficit, is the rate at which the debt is increasing. And if the deficit is increasing more slowly than growth, in other words, we're getting more growth in the economy than we are, the deficit's increasing, then we're going in the right direction. So the deficit doesn't have to be zero, but it does have to be less than the growth in the economy. And we're away from that now. And this government has actually pushed the deficit up substantially. It's now 154 billion per year. So that is what is unsustainable. The debt increasing at the rate it is. And that's what's got to be substantially reduced. And once we've got to a situation where the deficit is down to the correct figures, the manageable figures, which should be probably about 30 billion or less, then we can begin to think about maybe we can actually start getting to a point where we can start repaying debt. That's where we need to get to, but we need to focus first on the deficit, frankly.
Number 5 and the last one, and it appears to be a minnow. You've got the military defence, of course. 39 billion covers personnel, it covers equipment, manufacturers like BAE Systems, intelligence services, all lumped together. 39 billion. Now we are in critical times regarding that. and even the left of the Labour Party are saying, oh golly, we've been caught out here. My goodness, have we been caught out? But is this to do with the EU? The club? Oh, well, France will look after us if the United States don't come along, and Germany will do their bit. The Spanish will do a little bit, and it will be a little bit. We're all in this together. The EU can put forward a substantial army. Pardon?
Well, that is exactly the thinking of Keir Starmer, without a shadow of doubt. And you see, one thing that's been you noticed with Keir Starmer is he can't take decisions. Decisions can only be taken after. I mean, when Trump asked him, it's whether he was going to support him over this Iran war, Starmer answered, "I'll have to refer this back to my team," which caused Trump, hilarity, frankly. Well, you're Prime Minister of the UK, but you can't make a decision. And Trump was just mocking him. Oh, he's referring it to his team. Ha 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 ha. It's but that's Starmer to a T. And it's the same approach with the EU. Now, the thing is, if we rely on an EU army, what's going to happen is that the EU is never going to make any decisions. So we're going to have situations in the world which crop up and nothing happens. And by the way, while I'm talking like this, it is a tremendous credit to Boris Johnson that he was the opposite. Because when the Ukraine war happened in 2002, it was Boris Johnson that turned round to Zelensky and said, "You've got to fight them, don't give in, and we'll support you." Biden didn't. Biden at the time said, "Oh, Russia's got nuclear weapons, we can't take on Russia," and actually was saying to Zelensky, "We'll help you flee. We'll help you get out of Ukraine because, you're going to need to flee." And he was talking about recognizing an exiled Ukrainian government while the Russians took over Ukraine. That's what Biden was talking about in the early days of the war. But so it's a tremendous credit to Boris Johnson that he actually gave Zelensky the courage to take them on and fight. Now, Starmer would never have done that. Never. Starmer would have said, "Oh, we'll have to refer this to some European committee and see whether the committee can maybe do something in a couple of weeks' time." I mean, he can't make a decision. So if Starmer had been in power in 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, probably Ukraine would have been taken over. That's probably what would have happened. And incidentally, that's why Putin is so angry with Britain and has been threatening to send missiles over to Britain, because it was Britain that actually stopped him in the early days of the war.
Fascinating. Sid, dozens of North Sea oil and gas fields are being blocked by the aforementioned Ed Miliband when we desperately need them. The policies and the analysis of this are coming out every day. There are 51 new fields in British waters that could be feeding the oil and gas situation, and they're not allowing them to go ahead. Oh, it's exhausted the North Sea, they say. Labour lies. Let's be honest about that. That is not the case. And if you put that as well together with there are 60 extensions to existing fields that could be brought online that are being stopped by 78% taxes, as you've mentioned, by putting off the developers that want to get oil out of the North Sea. Now, this is what ministers are saying all the time. 2 new fields, massive fields, west of Scotland, west of the Shetland Islands. There's the Rose Field and the Jackdaw Field. Oh, it's going to take 10 years to develop these, say the Labour liars. Esso, Shell, BP have all said we can get this going by the end of this year. And still the ministers come on television, oh, it'll take 10 years. How low can this government get? Not much lower.
Well, yes, because the oil companies are saying we can be getting oil out within 9 months, and it's the government says 10 years, but oil companies saying 9 months. Something gone seriously wrong. But yeah, in order to get it out, they've got to get rid of this. See, the other thing that happened, by the way, it wasn't just that the Labour Party increased the windfall tax from 75 to 78. They also stopped the the oil companies being allowed to offset investment against the tax. So whereas under the Conservatives you had a 75% windfall tax, but if you invested money in new drilling, then that could be offset against the tax. So you didn't pay the 75% tax. So Labour Party have come in and said, oh no, we're not allowing that anymore. You've got to pay the windfall tax whether you invest in it or not. That's what's really, really hurt the oil companies and made investment in the North Sea almost impossible. But no, absolutely. I mean, a sensible approach would be Trump's approach: drill, baby, drill. It's get the oil out as quickly as we can, speedily as we can, as efficiently as we can, and it's there. It's absolutely there, and it's not 10 years; it's 9 months.
If the people saying that we're all going to die because of carbon dioxide turn out to be correct, well, let's put that off a few years because we'll die from a nuclear war event way before that could ever happen. Then we can sort out the CO2 if the truth hasn't been fully revealed about this, what I believe is a hoax for economic and political reasons. We won't discuss that, Sid, perhaps on another occasion. Yes. Well, I've been educating myself this week about the betting industry. Now, from a Christian point of view and a conservative point of view, small c, then betting is not a very good idea. It's got rid of a lot of family problems by destroying them. It's caused havoc, especially in the poorer part of the community. It's a drug at its worst extent. And this involves the big boys, the Bet365, William Hill, Red 32. It goes on and on. And strangely, it's very complex, aren't most things. But there are people that are professional gamblers and they actually make money from mainly betting on horses, but for betting on everything. And they're making an average of £100,000 a year. And when you get a winner, an individual person making £100,000 a year, that's not bad. 4 times the average wage. They're called sharps. They know what they're doing. If you're called a square, you're the vast majority of us if we bet, and the betting companies make a fortune out of us. But if you're a sharp, beware. Such is the corruption of this industry that they won't let you get away with it. You reach 100,000 and you are taken offline. And then when you complain, they don't answer. They use clever computer systems for making any excuse for not paying you out and for getting up to dirty tricks. So there you go. Don't earn 100,000 off betting. And you can actually very easily do this if you're a professional gambler. I mean, you can say, who's going to secure the first goal in the following football match? Who's going to get injured? How are you going to finish up at the end of the year? What position in the league table? You're betting the whole time. If you know what you're doing, then you can make a good income until the betting companies suss you out.
You see, I'm very aware of people being successful with horse racing betting, and normally those people are people that watch the horses very carefully. But increasingly football betting is becoming more and more popular. Now, I think the big danger is insider knowledge, which can also apply to horse racing to a degree, because somebody who is a professional punter will probably be looking for insider knowledge as to what's going on with the different horses and have more knowledge of the horses than you or me have, which is why they will literally be picking some horses over others. And the same can happen with football. You can have insider knowledge as to what's going on with injuries and so on and so forth, with the teams, with what's likely to be picked, with the and so on and so forth. And with that insider knowledge, you're then able to put bets, and you're much more likely to win. That's why I think the betting companies are justified to ask questions with people that are particularly successful, because they've probably got inside knowledge in order to be so successful, and therefore it's not a fair playing field.
Yep, that is perfectly true. The horses can be held back, not run races, and insider information will well reveal that, together with football, as you've mentioned. And this is supposed to be the sport of kings. We got a long history of this with the royal family. And you wonder sometimes, golly, are they setting a good example? Because it's not just the betting industry. There's all sorts of things going on behind the scenes, doping, even of animals.
Well, yeah, obviously that's a concern, but yeah, I mean, I guess at all times there's some people that want to cheat the system, and we've every so often people get caught. People get caught for being paid in order to accept defeat in a game, or to accept defeat in a snooker game, or whatever, and it comes out, these people accepted payment for defeat. Frankly, it's people cheating the system, and they need to be found out, and it's all wrong. There's no justification for it in any situation, frankly.
Let's have some good news about the war. There we are. Does it produce good news? Well, it does for Devon and Cornwall, because they've got hidden wealth there. Bit of gold down there, like there is in Wales, of course. But that's not it. It's tungsten. That is a brute of a metal. It's got apparently 3,500 degree melting point. It is really tough. And there's not a lot of it around, but there is in Devon and Cornwall. And they're opening hitherto shut mines for donkey's years. And they reckon for the next 10, maybe 15 years, people will be upgrading their armies. Not only tanks, it's the pointed end of missiles, anything that needs a very, very strong metal. And the world is going to come to us. Hitherto, it's been going to China. So there we are. God's given some decent stuff apart from coal in Britain, apart from oil. He's now given tungsten.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Well, Cornwall has obviously in the past has been very famous for its tin mines, but yeah, it's good that we have got some precious metals there. Incidentally, that's why Trump was so much in favour of trying to get Greenland, because Greenland has got enormous wealthy in these metals, which are so needed for modern industry. And I think actually the deal that he finally got was that he will be able to mine some of these metals even without taking over the country. But he was seen to be very happy with his deal. Of course, the left went crazy when he was saying he wanted Greenland, but he's clever. He's very clever, and God bless him.
Well, good poker player, certainly. Which leaves us to Canada, not very far away from the States. Boy, have they got a liberal progressive problem government, and they've had it for some years. It's getting worse, though, because they are now putting through a bill that will say you cannot quote hate speech from the Bible. Now, hitherto, we've had a get out of jail card free, still have in the United Kingdom. For how long? anybody can guess. That's not sufficient for Canada. It is hate speech, say the Liberals, and they want to get rid of this jail card, let's call it. If you say it, as an example, it says in Leviticus, it says in Deuteronomy, it says in Romans that homosexuality is not a good idea. In fact,
well,
it says the truth, which is beyond it is not a good idea. Then that's hate speech. You will go straight to jail.
well, yeah, well, yes, but obviously these verses need understanding. But I mean, Leviticus is very clear: a man shall not lie with a man as with a woman; it is an abomination. Now, and Romans 1 is very clear as well. The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against the wickedness of men, because by their wickedness they don't accept the truth. And it's like God gave them up to baseless minds, men committing shameless acts with men and receiving in their own body the due penalty for their error. Now, you see, the thing is, what they're basically saying is we will not allow you to have an opinion that homosexuality is sin. We won't allow you to have that opinion. Or if you do have that opinion, you're allowed to hold it at home, but you're not allowed to speak about it in public. That's what they're saying. Now, in my view, what they're doing is suppressing the truth, because they're basically saying people are not allowed to speak the truth. They're only allowed to speak our lies. But actually, if they're going to go down this road, the Quran is far more controversial than the Bible, even on sexual matters. But they talk about for any sexual deviance, having 24 lashes is in the Quran, as well as all these sword verses where it's kill the disbelievers, wage war against those who don't believe in Allah. And in Surah 47, it defines what a believer is and defines what a disbeliever is. And it says, for the disbelievers, cut off their heads. But apparently it's okay to quote those things. That's not in the legislation. So they're only attacking the Bible. And it's quite interesting, by the way, it was in Holland that they actually had a law where they were actually talking about not being allowed to quote some of these things from the Quran. But so they were looking at, in my view, a much more serious issue, than the idea that somehow you can't quote the Bible is completely and utterly wrong, because basically what they're doing, as I say, is suppressing the truth.
Yeah, we're being muzzled again. We move on swiftly to the football and cricket scene. We'll talk about cricket for a start. Why Mr. McCullum and Ben Stokes have been reappointed is anybody's guess. Do we approve of Bazball that's been an utter failure, or have we been captivated? Do people realise that the cricket season is going to be completely different this year? The 4-day local matches, let's call them, the county matches, they're going to be confined. July and August, it's going to be Bazball, the dreaded 100, which I hate. I can see short form of cricket having a place, but that dreaded 100, no, for various reasons. But what it means is that shortly we'll not be able to man a test team to any country, never mind the Australians laughing at us once again. If we don't get county cricket going back to where it should be, which is the next stage up to test cricket, will never be any good. By thrashing and bashing, clearly this winter has shown, Sid, it don't work.
Well, we've never done, well, most years, I should say, most years we don't do well in Australia. I mean, we did actually win one test in Australia this time. So, and that, that was a sort of an achievement where frequently we've actually been whitewashed. But what was actually interesting when you looked at the statistics, the Australians were actually scoring at a faster rate than the English test team was. So it's not, or abundantly clear that we're just thrashing the ball around and they're playing slowly. But I do agree that both are important in my view. I mean, having the skill to be able to attack is important, but having the skill to be able to bat slowly is also important for a test team. So I think both skills are enjoyable to watch, frankly. But increasingly, I guess, with the demands of instant gratification on television, people want a quick game and a quick result. I think the 2020 game. I don't know about the 100. I never really watched that, frankly, but I think the 20 over game has proved very interesting, very fascinating. And the 50 over game is certainly well worth watching, as well as the test matches. I find all levels of cricket interesting, but all levels have to be mastered. I don't think McCallum and Stokes have been a failure. I think I agree that they should be given more time.
There you go. He's very patient, Sid. We'll go on to the last patients. It's dear old Arsenal. I think they're going to do it just, but many would say no. They're getting close to the line. 5 more matches, Sid.
Well, Man City are the favourites now, because they're 3 points behind and have a slightly better goal difference if you take into account they've got a game in hand. And the game in hand, I believe the next game is going to be against Burnley, who are virtually relegated. So, Man City could easily go there and score 5 or 6 goals, and then all of a sudden they'll become the strong favourites. I think now it's really in Man City's hands, and if they just win the rest of their matches and have any decent victories, then they're going to win, which I think is I would far rather Arsenal won it. But at the end of the day, it was in Arsenal's hands. They were well ahead, and they've faltered. That's the reality of it. And
You're gonna have another manager biting the dust, aren't you? Even if they're coming as runners up, it will be deemed a failure. But he's an odd character, isn't he?
no, I don't think Arsenal should sack Arteta. Absolutely not. When you think what's happened to Spurs, I mean, I think it was a mistake for them to sack their manager, frankly. And I thought so at the time because, although he wasn't doing particularly well, he should have been, he was provenly a good manager and they should have given him a bit more time. But they brought somebody else in who was even worse, and now they're looking at relegation. It's no, to sack a manager because he came second, I think would be a terrible mistake. And by the way, that shows, what a disaster for Sheffield United when they sacked Chris Wilder, who very nearly got promoted but came third, so didn't make it. So they sacked him. And then what happened? The total disaster for the team. Same with Wolves. I mean, look what's happened with Wolves. Sorry, with Nottingham Forest. Nottingham Forest, did incredibly well last season. Only just missed out on the Champions League. But because they missed out on the Champions League and the owner wanted the Champions League, they sacked the manager. So then what happens? The team is then facing relegation. It's sacking the manager can sometimes give a team a boost. It gave Manchester United a boost because they had the wrong manager in place. But, it can sometimes give a team a boost. But often it doesn't give the team a boost. It actually makes the team even worse.
I think it's very simple. It's the soft Southerners giving way at the last fence, to mix metaphors. You want some northern grit in there, Sid.
Mm. Maybe. I don't know whether it's a matter of north or south, but yes.
The same couldn't be said of politics, I'm sure. Sid, thank you so much. We'll look forward to next week.